Nearly 42 years later, a jury found Philip Lee Wilson guilty of raping and killing Robin Brooks in a Rancho Cordova apartment in 1980.
So now she can rest. She's never coming back. It's never going to bring her back.
There's really nothing like waking up on a fresh spring day full of new possibilities. On lovely days such as this, the possibility of death should be the furthest thing from our minds. Unbeknownst to Robin Brooks, that was the exact fate she was facing. 20-year-old Robin Gisela Brooks was working as a clerk at a place called Donut Time, a pastry shop located on Kiefer Boulevard in Sacramento, California. On a lovely day in April 1980, Robin failed to show up for her 4 p.m. shift. It wasn't like her to not show up without giving notice, especially since she lived only a block away. Something wasn't right. A friend and coworker of hers went to check up on her at the apartment where she was living at the time. They knocked on the door several times, but there was no response. Had she gone out? Was she unable to come to the door? Or was it something more mysterious? No one knew. Where we talk about under-the-radar cases from around the globe. And in today's episode, we're looking at the mysterious 40-year-old cold case of Philip Wilson that's finally been solved. Let's get into the mystery without any further ado. Robin had recently followed her sister to the West Coast, settling in Sacramento from Highland, New York about a half a year before. She was just starting her new life. It was the 24th of April, 1980 at midnight, when the workers at Donut Time were wrapping up for the day. Robin was working the late shift at the pastry shop. She was chosen to do the night shift as she only lived a block away. It was a usual night for her. After a last-minute check, she turned the keys and locked the shop. She followed her normal route, walking home to the country club apartments where she had moved in about 6 weeks prior. Later that day, she was scheduled to be back at work at 4 p.m. When she didn't show up, her colleagues grew concerned. She didn't know many people in the area yet, and they thought she could be in trouble. The last time they'd seen her, she was joyful as always, and everything seemed to be fine. A friend volunteered to go check up on her. They knocked on the door several times, but there was no answer from the other side. The dead silence gave them a foreboding feeling. Then they returned to the shop to find someone willing to break in. This might sound extreme, but they cared for their friend and just wanted to make sure that everything was okay. When they returned, they continued to bang on the door to no avail. Finally, they decided to break down the door. After they finally gained entry, they witnessed a horrifying scene. Robin was found on her waterbed in the bedroom. She had been stabbed multiple times. The killer was so brutal that he even stabbed right through her, puncturing the waterbed that her body lay upon. They wasted no time and called the police to report a murder. This was a very difficult case for the Sacramento homicide detectives. Brooks was new in the area and she didn't have many friends. She had no boyfriend. She'd been living in the apartment for only about 2 months, and all she did was the commute to work and back. In fact, she'd moved there to be closer to her job. She was still just getting settled into her new apartment, and even on the night of the incident, her coworker said Brooks joked about her bed not being made. This led police to believe she was murdered immediately after her shift. There were no leads to follow and no clues to investigate. They concluded the case was a murder with special circumstances. It was speculated that the murder happened in the course of a sexual assault. When they questioned Jolene Davis, the manager of the apartment Brooks lived in, she claimed that she wasn't the type to look for trouble and she hadn't done anything to attract any undue attention. Investigators were at a loss. This was just a normal girl minding her own business. She had no enemies or obsessive exes. Her neighbors were questioned and did not recall overhearing any disturbance that night. It's never easy to catch a random killer with no known ties to the victim. It was especially difficult in those days because DNA technology was not yet available. Police surmised that this was a possible case of a stalker, and sure enough, her colleagues were aware of a strange occurrence Brooks talked about. Brooks mentioned to them a very strange man, a customer at the restaurant who was very persistent. The man kept trying to get her attention, trying to talk to her in the days leading up to her murder. Investigators believe this man likely was involved. He may have been enraged at her for rejecting him. Unfortunately, Brooks never really described the man. This was before there were CCTV cameras everywhere. There was no way for investigators to know who this mystery suspect was, and the lead fizzled out. Detectives believed there was a high chance that the man was secretly following Brooks. How else would he know where she lived? Brooks had been working at the donut shop for 6 weeks, and the man who had been trying to get her attention might have been keeping an eye on her, watching her comings and goings. The attack seemed to have been planned and devised after careful observation. Fingerprints were found on the windowsill. It was theorized that the murderer must have entered the apartment through the window waiting for Brooks to return from work, and as soon as she entered and locked the door behind her, she was attacked and raped. The neighbors did not overhear any kind of disturbance, as she did not have any time to react. The intruder and attacker must have been a strong man, strong enough to overpower her. They believed the initial motive would have been a sexual assault, but if she recognized this man, he would also have to kill her. The incident likely happened in a rush. The brutality with which the crime was committed suggested a grudge murder, yet she had no known enemies. Investigators collected and sent blood evidence in for testing. Back in 1980, the information we could retrieve from the blood was limited. They could get the blood type, among other things, but not the intricate details. The investigation found that there was blood at the scene that did not match Brooks. This pointed to the murderer somehow cutting himself during the stabbing. Investigators now had 2 pieces of DNA evidence, from the blood of the murderer and his semen. Unfortunately, there wasn't much they could do with it at the time. In 1980, they had no way to process the DNA. There was no combined DNA index system or CODIS back in those days. It was available only after 1994, and what they had was very limited, only to be used by the FBI, usually to find missing people. Even the fingerprint testing system wasn't as efficient as it is now. AFIS, or Automated Fingerprint Automation System, although it existed, wasn't widely available until 6 years later in 1986. Despite the case being reviewed and worked on thoroughly, it went cold. The police closed Brooks's file and stacked it with the other cold cases. In the early 2000s, significant progress was made in DNA forensics, and we began gathering data and creating a database for DNA comparison. These DNA databases were made available to law enforcement agencies across the country. This was an incredible breakthrough. Yet if the DNA you were looking for had not been uploaded to the database because that person had never been arrested for a serious crime, then it was useless. The real break in this case, though, would not come until 2017, when the Sacramento County Sheriff's Office investigators got Parabon Nano Labs involved. The Parabon Nano Labs is a Virginia-based laboratory that offers forensic genealogy services. This technology can produce something called Snapshot, which is formulated by using DNA phenotyping to produce an unknown individual's ancestry and physical appearance. The investigation had a new lead. They had a scientifically rendered likeness of the person who killed Brooks. The technology was a success, and so the authorities reopened Brooks's file, and using the DNA profile developed by Parabon, they built a family tree for Brooks's killer. The police gave the news to the Brooks family, and their plea for justice was ignited again. The family then posted a column in the newspaper offering $10,000 as a reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the man. The newspaper article told of how the killer's DNA had been profiled to the Combined DNA Index System database, but it did not yield any matches. However, this article was published 37 years after the murder. 37 years is a long time, and memories fade quickly. People move away or pass away. The odds of someone remembering something for this new sketch were low, yet the family was hopeful. They say time heals, but how can one ever forget such a brutal crime? How can one live knowing that they've done something so terrible? Brooks's family had been suffering the loss for such a long time, and to know that the man who did this is free, and worse, could still be committing similar crimes, was agonizing. Maria Eric Brooks, Brooks's sister, still holds the guilt in her heart because Brooks followed her out to Sacramento. The police, however, were still working on the genetic angle. They had a family tree of the murderer, and through much research, they were finally able to narrow it down to one man. They compared the DNA in the blood and semen which they found at the crime scene, and they were a perfect match. The fingerprints were also a match. They finally had a name: Philip Lee Wilson. It was exactly 40 years to the day, April 24th, 2020, when Sacramento law enforcement officials announced that they'd finally arrested the man who raped and killed 20-year-old Robin Gisela Brooks. He was 31 years old at the time of the murder and lived in a rental home on Happy Lane, less than 2 miles from Brooks's apartment. He was 71 years old when he was arrested in his home in North Sacramento. When he was put before the court, the prosecutors pointed out that the DNA also matched the evidence in a rape case which occurred 3 weeks before the murder. Deputy District Attorney described Philip Wilson as a charismatic man who had a lot of friends. It's baffling to know a man who seemed so friendly could have those types of skeletons in his closet. Officials speculate that Wilson killed her just to fulfill a sick fantasy. The family waited exactly 4 decades before they found the man who had turned their lives upside down. It's interesting how life works. The guilty verdict came to him on his 72nd birthday. That's a birthday present he can cherish for the rest of his sad life. He'll be celebrating all of his birthdays in the future behind bars. Hopefully, the family finds some comfort in knowing this. What do you think of this case? Let us know in the comment section below. Don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons, as well as the notification bell to get your daily dose of mysterious true crime stories. Thank you so much for watching.